All right, welcome to the Leadership Puzzle, where we break down the challenges of modern leadership and help you put the right pieces together. I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci. Today, we're talking about a very hot topic, Generation Z, and how leaders can better understand, support, and work with this rising generation. And to help us make sense of all of this, I'm joined by someone that I have a huge amount of respect for and who has dedicated her career at building better workplaces. Ellen Raim, thank you for joining. She is the founder of People Matters and best-selling author of Play the Game. She helps early career professionals navigate the corporate world and teaches companies how to close that generational gap and how people help people think, grow, and work together more effectively. So, whether you're a Gen Z employee trying to find your place or a leader trying to figure out how in the world to deal with this next generation, this conversation is for you. Ellen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Oh, well, it's great. You have this amazing career. We first connected a minute ago at Intel, but you've worked at some just amazing companies, and we could spend a whole time talking about that. But I think most people want to talk about something that you're really, really passionate about, and that is really that intergenerational career dynamics. How did you get into this topic?
So this actually found me, and let me tell you the story. So the last company that I was with before I moved into consulting was Nautilus, the equipment company. So it didn't survive after COVID. So when everybody was at home, they needed treadmills and exercise bicycles, and but then everybody bought one. And when we were allowed back out of our houses, the company didn't really survive that. And so I decided now that I didn't have a CHRO job that I was going to consult. And I assumed that I was going to consult on general HR topics because that's what my background is and that's where all my connections are.
Yep.
But I have a 26-year-old daughter who is right in the heart of Gen Z. And she's known that I have an employment law background and I've been a CHRO for a whole lot of years. And so she's always used me as her, Johnny on the spot kind of mom, what do I do right now? And so she would call with simple issues that I began to realize no one teaches you, right? So she called one day, for instance, and said, Mom, every Monday my boss sits down with all of us and goes through what we need to do that week. And so she just came and talked to me. It's Tuesday, and the thing she want that I thought I was going to do on Thursday, she wants right now. And I don't know what to do about that. So, I explained to her, you go back and you work with her to reprioritize your tasks. And my daughter said, I can't do that because I'll look like a fool. And I explained, no, you will look like a fool if you don't accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish all week. So you need to reset priorities. And she said, thank you. My daughter is the most social person I have ever met. Like she could talk to a lamppost and make it her friend. So she has thousands of friends that are all in her age cohort. And they would go out to dinner or they would go out to happy hour or whatever, and they would bring their hands and be talking about their work problems. And finally she said, call my mom. My mom gives really good work advice. So I would get these texts from people I
Which
didn't
has to
know.
make you feel really good.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll help my kids' friends. I get these texts from people I don't know, and they say, "Hi, you don't know me. I'm Reeve's friend. Could you please help me?" She says you give really good work advice. So I got about a call a week from my daughter's friends, and they were all questions of things that you just realize you learned by watching the circumstances in your office, but they're not all in an office anymore. And the world has sped up so much since we were coming up. So there's a whole lot less chance for error. And so their questions were this combination of youthful naivete and youthful arrogance. And a lot of it was just getting them to understand the circumstances from the perspective of their boss or the perspective of the fact that a company, an organization is a system. And so if you do this, this is going to happen. But anyway, they're all calling. I'm helping them all. And then one day my daughter calls and she says, George is going to call you because George is trying to figure out whether to suck it up or quit his job. And so I said, please, no more after George. I can't do this anymore. It's eating my life. I cannot start a business. And she said, no, 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 mom, you're getting this reputation of being the go-to person for like all young professionals in Washington, D.C. So like, we'll help you make a business. So I got 5 or 6 of them on a Zoom call. And I said, would you really pay me for this? And one of the young women said, do you know how much it costs to buy a mixed drink in Washington? And I'm not putting the pieces together. I'm like, no, how much does it cost to buy a drink in Washington, D.C.? She says, $25. So I'm still not getting it. And she looks at me, she goes, Ellen, that means if I just didn't go out drinking one weekend, I would have enough money to pay you. So I'm like, what, $50? She said, no, 125, 150. And so like the mom in me is going like, please don't drink that much. That's really not a good thing. But but that's how the business launched. I asked them all kinds of questions about what they would expect, how they wanted to get information, how often they thought they would reach out, would they want episodic help, or would they want to do more like coaches and sign up for some kind of you could call me 3 times a month kind of thing. And after that, I built a website, I started speaking, I did an awful lot of research, and I've written a book for specifically for this generational cohort from the perspective of, hey, I've been around the block a whole bunch of times. I've always been inside of a big system. Let me tell you how the system really works. And you can choose to do with that whatever you want. So you can like understand this stuff and then you can play the game better. Or you could say, not for me, I'm going to go start my own company, or I'm going to find a company run by a millennial, or maybe my friends are starting a startup, I'll go work with them.
Yeah.
But it felt like giving little tiny advice to one person at a time wasn't going to help really fix what I think is a generational rift. And so I wrote a book and I'm selling the book, and that's how this all came about.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, how many companies start by accident almost? So, but that's an amazing story. So you spent a lot of time with Gen Z. I've got a couple of kids that are right at that Gen Z mark as well. So it really resonates with me. Um, but what do you think makes Gen Z fundamentally different in how they look at things versus an X, Y, or even a millennial? I mean, there's different mindsets,
Mhm.
surprisingly, even though they're not really, you know, separated by, too many decades.
Yep. So, uh, to answer your question, I'm going to talk about how the leaders think and then also how Gen Z thinks so you can see the chasm. So, leadership right now is mostly Gen X.
Yeah.
There's a few boomers left in the workplace, but the oldest Gen X is 60. So that's about, who's in the leadership position. And if you think about what was going on in the world and how Gen X was raised, and I'll tell you that, and then I'll tell you with the same about Gen Z, you'll see the difference. So Gen X was raised without the internet, without cell phones, without seat belts, without bicycle helmets. Toys didn't have warning labels. They were sort of left on their own and told to fend for themselves. Their parents, like I could talk about my parents, their parents said to them after school and on the weekends, go outside and play and just come home when the streetlights are on. So you were pretty much unsupervised without a way for anybody to find you. So you had to learn to take care of yourself very early in your life. So we Gen X is the figure it out yourself generation.
Yeah.
Then you also learned creativity and diplomacy because I know I would go knock on the doors of all the other kids that I knew lived right around me, and we'd travel in a pack. And in that pack, I had to figure out what you would all do together. So there's the creativity. And somebody was always having a fight with somebody or didn't want to go, or so there's the diplomacy part of it. You also learned how to deal with hierarchy because when I would go knock on the doors of all these other people, if I said, can Andrew come out to play? That's what my next door neighbor's name was. The door was never opened by Andrew. It was always opened by his father or his mother, and you would have to talk to an adult, and you would understand that adults are sort of in charge, and you would call them Mr. or Mrs. And so we learned hierarchy, we learned take care of yourself, we learned figure it out yourself. What was going on in the world for us? So uh, we had Enron and Watergate that happened. So I don't think anyone in this generation ever thought that all companies were a force for good. What was also going on was our parents were very strict disciplinarians, and so you never showed your feelings. I've had folks in this generational cohort say to me, "Yeah, my dad would say, you better stop crying, or I'm going to give you something to cry about." So, you tamp your feelings down, and then the other thing that was going on here is, that what was going on in the world, maybe the world wasn't the greatest place, maybe every company wasn't the greatest place, but you were given a social contract that said if you work hard you will be rewarded. So no matter whether you thought about Enron or Watergate or whatever, you would say to yourself, if I get with the program and I get in line and I put my nose to the grindstone and I work really hard, I will climb the ladder and I can live the American dream. And that's like I can afford a house, I can have a couple kids, I can go on vacation, I can have a car, I don't have to choose between a car and a kid or a car and a house. And so that's how the leadership thinks. So if you think about what that transfers into in a workplace, this is the no news is good news. I don't have to coach you because I had to learn to figure it out by myself. I don't bring my problems into the workplace, so I don't want you to overshare, and I don't care about your mental health. And so you can sort of see where some of the differences come from. And I don't believe that a company needs to be anything other than a company. It doesn't need to have, it doesn't have to be mission first. It doesn't have to take a stand on things that are going on in the outside world. It's about me selling my product. Then came millennials, and I'll hold off on millennials because to me they're the peanut butter in the sandwich. They're holding the other two generations together. So let's talk about Gen Z. And because those of us that are, Gen X and who are left in the workplace that are boomers, we did this. We created the what this cohort thinks about. I don't think anybody realized what it was going to do in terms of driving frustration into the workplace. So unlike Gen X, Gen Z never knew a world that wasn't connected. So they got cell phones in elementary school specifically so their parents knew where they were. Like as compared to, like, we'll go back to Gen X for a second, there was a public service announcement in the United States that came on every night, and there were like movie stars that did it, and government officials, and it went something like, "Parents, it's 10 o'clock at night. Do you know where your children are?" Now, my husband is still checking Find My Friends on my daughter's phone, and she's an adult. So they were very connected from the very beginning. And all this free play was replaced by play dates and lessons. And so they are very used to getting feedback all along the way, because if you're taking some kind of lesson, somebody is giving you feedback. If you're in an organized play date, that usually was okay, we're all going to build a tree, like a gingerbread house. And so you would get help and instruction all along the way. So first difference right there. They also had parents that were a lot more involved. So here's sort of another example. If I had ever tried to call my parents' friends by their first names,
Oh,
I'd have gotten slapped on the side of the head. my daughter has never called any of my friends Mr. and Mrs. anything. So there's a blurring of hierarchy. And so that translates into the workplace too, because they've been treated more like equals or friends than they have like spare the rod, spoil the child, or you should be spoken. What's the
Yeah.
other expression? Like children should be seen but not heard,
Not
that
heard.
kind of,
Yep. Yep. Don't
right.
speak unless spoken to.
Yes, exactly. Those kind of things. So, and then the next thing that happened was because they were so connected, they also saw sort of social upheaval and corporation scandals. But because they were so connected, that has been now quickly followed by activism. So I can think of two examples. One, um, there was just a big boycott of Target because they rolled back a bunch of their DEI initiatives. But it works both ways. A year before that, there was a boycott of Budweiser beer because they supported a trans influencer. So,
Right.
all driven by social media. So, that created in this generational cohort a belief that companies need to take a stand, and taking a stand one way or the other is going to it's just part of your marketing strategy. It's part of how you're going to build revenue, which is very, very different than the people that are in charge right now.
Which
So
kind of goes back to companies, they really should just stay out of it altogether. That way you're not getting Bud Light or targeted on either side of the spectrum.
yes, yes, that's not a bad way to think about it, but sometimes that backfires on you too, because sometimes then your own employees
Mm.
uh, you have problems with your own employees because you look like you're dodging subjects that are important to them too. So that's a very fraught, that's a whole nother topic, and that's a very fraught topic, but it just shows you some of the difference. So like, I'll give you a real example from when I was still a CHRO. The last time I was a CHRO, that's when George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
And so I had a number of Gen Z employees come to me and say, can I take time off to go to the protests? And my answer to that was, you have vacation time. I don't police how you use your vacation time. That's totally fine. And then they said, would you pay if I get arrested to bail me out of jail? And I
Seriously.
seriously, yeah. And so, I had to say, well, no, that's not one of the benefits that the company offers. But that's how different the in the cultural mindset is. So if you think about a Gen Z early career professional, they're used to collaboration, they're used to sharing, they're used to feedback. They believe in mission first because they've seen it so much through their devices, and they are a lot more, it's a lot more important to them to have transparency and authenticity than I think was ever shown to us as we were coming up through the ranks in a workplace. So these are very, very different mindsets. And so just really quickly on millennials, who are the ones in the middle. So millennials pretty much split right down the center. Millennials who are born closer to Gen X, they're actually called elder millennials. They think a lot like Gen X. And the millennials that were born closer to Gen Z, they have a special name too. They're called Zennials. And so they really
Okay.
are the bridge generation. So the elder millennials, they actually, when they were in elementary school, they actually had to go to a library and use an encyclopedia. But as they got older, they then started to Google and use Wikipedia. The elder millennials, they had to memorize phone numbers. But as they got older and as the younger millennials came along, they got cell phones. And I've two numbers memorized, right? My kid and my husband. I can't remember phone numbers anymore. So uh, the unique thing about the millennials are they are the generation where parents started being softer to their children.
Yeah.
And so if you remember, this is the generation that like everybody gets a participation trophy and nobody's ever told no, there's no cut little league teams now. And um, so they understand a lot more about, being, uh, having help all the way along. So they really are the bridge generation, right? They resonate with a lot of the stuff that Gen Z cares about, but they remember or they understand or they lived through a lot of the stuff that Gen X came up with. So they really have become, in some places, the generational translators. But it's also really hard for them. They are stuck in the middle. But there you can see of the beginning of a softening of the rigid way that we came up, right? That Gen X is operating their companies. So that gives you an idea of, you asked a tiny question, I gave a really long answer, but that's the difference between the two generations, culturally and in the workplace.
What one of the things that I think about a lot is um, when we were starting the workforce, there were a lot of these entry level kind of roles where we just had to get in and we learned it from, learned how to do different things from the ground up. Um, and now what we're seeing is there's more and more automation, things that are taking some of that, those places where we learned, they're not available to these, especially Gen Zs. And
Yeah,
I mean, forget Alpha after them,
yeah. And,
because
and it's getting worse with AI.
and I was about to say that same thing. So how can we help the um, that generation get the fact that, okay, you can't just say, well, I'll Google it, or because they're not learning this. And so I want to two sides of this is, how can we help the Gen Zs get the fact that you're going to have to roll up your sleeve and get in there and do the work, and put in your time, but also what can companies do to reconfigure the work so that
Yeah.
there's meaningful work for, these Gen Zs that are trying to get their career started.
Right. And so let me start with what the companies can do, and then we'll talk about what the individual employees can do. I think it's really short-sighted to say that you're going to eliminate all of the sort of entry-level work with AI. And yeah, a lot of it can be automated and made faster. But what's going to happen, like you said, is you're not filling the pipeline. You have to be you have to get your knowledge from somewhere. So you have to be able to sort of climb a ladder because you're not always going to be able to bring somebody in from the side. And I'll give you the perfect analogy for that. The armed services do a very, very good job of training of everybody from the day they get there, because you can't turn around and go, you know what, we're out of lieutenants and we're just going to, like, we'll call the Russian army and see if they'll send us over some lieutenants. So you they've understood from the very beginning that they have to grow from within. And the same thing here. So right now there's a lot of turnover, there's a lot of laying off. There was an article in some newsletter I read this morning that said lots and lots of companies are turning to ex-employees who've retired and trying to bring them back because then they don't have to train them. And everybody is really struggling for productivity now because we're in a pretty wobbly place in the world. And so they're trying to do whatever they can to squeeze as much productivity out of people as they can. But they're not going to be able to hire already trained people from the outside to fill all these positions forever. By 2030, Gen Z and younger millennials, so Zennials, will be 35% of the workforce.
Yeah.
That's not nothing.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make 35% of your workforce AI, whatever algorithms, what are you going to, that algorithm, at least right now, can't grow into the next job. And they certainly can't meet with clients. And
Oh yeah.
so I try to help businesses understand exactly what you're saying, which is you have to take the long view on this. You have to structure some jobs So you have entry level positions. Uh, even because even people that have like MBAs, they still need a
Yeah.
junior job at some point. And we're in a really interesting flux right now. I think people are trying to figure out exactly what AI can do. And you read every day about, oh, we've got a new tool and AI can do this and this. But I know in our world, if you just look at what AI has done to recruiting, I'm not sure it's I'm not sure the end state so far is totally wonderful. I think you still need people and people judgment in that. So that's the way I try to convince businesses is you need to grow up your workforce from the bottom, and the way that you do that is you do that alongside of AI. So the Gen Z generation is incredibly tech savvy, but work together to try to figure out logical and useful tech rather than just, oh, AI for AI's sake. And so then what do I tell the Gen Z cohort that comes and works with me? A lot of this is around explaining to them how things really work. So there are 5 or 6 points of really strong friction,
All
which
right.
is causing Gen Z right now is being terminated more quickly than any other generational cohort that's ever come in. More than there was a big study that was just recently done, and
Interesting.
over 50% of the managers, and there were thousands and thousands of people in this study, over 50% of the managers said that they had terminated a Gen Z employee with less than a year of tenure. So they're getting so frustrated, they're just like, leave. And the points of friction, I think, are things where you just need to set expectations. So one of the biggest ones is people say, Gen Z employee came into my office and said they want to be promoted. They've only been here like 6 months and they don't know anything yet. Like, what do I do? That's not about, I think I'm better than anybody else, or I'm trying to like get the kudos without the work. It's that this generation is very worried about money because the delta between the rise in prices and the rise in the cost of living versus the rise in salaries has gotten so far apart that, we're talking about the American dream for Gen X. Gen Z doesn't know if that American dream is ever going to be available to them.
Right.
So
Right.
some large number of them have side gigs, side hustles, just because they're so worried about money. So this I want to be promoted is really can you explain to me how I climb the ladder so that I can make more money? So for Gen Z, a lot of this is really understanding the the thinking and the expectations of the older generations and learning how to speak so they can listen to you.
Yeah.
So, Gen Z is really annoyed with just keep giving me more work. I want to know where that's going because they see all the layoffs and, some of their parents have been laid off. Their friends have certainly been laid off. And so they want to know that they don't see extra work as, oh, I'm prepping myself so that I can get the next promotion because there might not be promotions. They want to make sure that the extra work is really helping them grow and not just, hey, you're the newest kid, so I'm going to dump everything on you. So there's a lot of misaligned expectations and poor communication. And so that's kind of the advice that I would give everybody is you're not going to solve this by staying in your blaming, judgmental mindset and just kicking people out or trying to get rid of them because I'm going to bring in AI. On the other side, you can't stay in your judgmental mindset that all older generations are rude and curt and unwilling to help you because you're not going to be able to succeed inside of an organization. So a lot of this, and I know that this simplifies it a lot, but a lot of it comes down to expectation settings and communication.
Which ironically hasn't changed in any generation.
Yep. Yeah. I know. And you do leadership work, right? And there's a big problem with leadership, right?
Oh,
Learning how
huge.
to set clear expectations, how to motivate people, how to set a vision. It starts all the way at the bottom and, goes all the way till you get to the C-suite.
Well, it certainly doesn't help when only 30% of managers or leaders have had any form of formal training
Wow,
to
that's
manage
small.
or lead people. I mean, it's shocking. And if you think that probably a lot of those frontline middle managers are squarely in that millennial group that were really coming up during COVID and have not been given any kind of training.
Mhm.
No wonder it's that communication and expectation gap is growing, because those are core foundational things that you know management 101.
Right, right. I read yesterday that that group of people that you're talking about, first line and sort of middle managers, are turning to ChatGPT to help them understand like how to manage and what to say. And so they'll ask ChatGPT, please write me a script so I can tell this employee that they're not doing a very good job. Oh my gosh. We are, if that's really going on and we're not training them, I didn't realize the number was that low. We are like on a path to having like every company turn into a hot mess.
Well, and that number is at least 2 years old, and I think it's probably sub 30% now. I mean, if they were to, just because I don't think anybody's doing any kind of training. I mean, budgets being what they are,
Mhm.
uh, cash flow companies are just holding on to cash flow. They're not hiring people. They're not spending it on their employees. Now there's some big companies that certainly are,
Sure.
but for the most part, it's not a healthy environment for any generation. And what was it? Microsoft just laid off 9,000 employees. We're dating the podcast here, but it just goes to show that there's a lot of churn still in the system that isn't going to help this Gen Z and certainly the alphas, which are only a couple of years behind,
Right,
really.
right. If I had one message to give to employers, it would be that your workforce is your strategic enabler. And so, especially at times like now, that's the time to double down and really pay attention to making your workforce successful. And, that's not like empty the L&D department and
Yeah.
not give anybody any management training and not try to figure out why you're terminating Gen Z employees at such a rapid rate. Like if you put some attention into all of this, I think it would be a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were talking, it reminded me when I worked in Japan, new college graduates would spend 6 to 9 months just learning business etiquette. Now, it was Japan, right? So, where to sit at a conference table or in a car with a more senior person, right? I mean, they had to learn how to bow effectively and whatnot. But I think that same kind of concept could could be a competitive advantage for a company that says, okay, from an onboarding perspective of a Gen Z, let's spend a little bit of time talking about, you know, understanding how to be successful in this environment, and
Right.
and then
And
also teaching managers how to manage effectively.
right, exactly. Yes, I'm 100% agree on both counts. And you said workplace etiquette, and you mentioned sitting around a conference table, but junior employees have the same issues here in the US. Like, do I talk in a meeting? When is it okay to talk in a meeting? If everybody is more senior than I am I allowed to talk? Should I talk? Does that show people my value because they'll see I'm smart? So those are the kinds of things that young employees struggle with. And if all meetings are on Zoom, it's harder to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so I very much agree that an onboarding that's more than like a day long where all they're having you do is, sign your health insurance paperwork would really help.
So, I mean, I think some of the challenges with this generation probably is this remote environment where, I mean, we were talking before we started recording. It's just lonely not going into an office and building that camaraderie and those relationships. And I mean, this generation is very much, I'm happy on Zoom. Well, for a time period, you're happy on Zoom, but you're lonely, and that causes mental challenges and wellness issues, and you don't have a connection with people, and so you're more likely to maybe go jump from job to job too.
Right.
So,
Right.
what's your perspective on that? How do you
Uh,
coach Gen Zs on that?
so first, I don't think we're putting the genie back in the bottle. I think that some large number of companies are going to stay hybrid. And I
Sure.
know that that a lot of the big companies are trying to bend everyone to their will and bring them all back 5 days. And maybe that'll happen, but it's going to take another 5 years if it really
Yeah.
does happen.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, there's pros and cons with both things. It's much easier inside of a workplace to find mini mentors, right? So, if you hear like, oh, go find yourself a mentor, and you think that has to be like a senior person, but it doesn't really. It can be a peer or just somebody that's there a couple years more than you,
Yeah.
and you can ask for advice. And that's much, much easier to do if you see somebody sitting at their desk and you can just wander by than if you have to make it intentional and set up a Zoom call.
Yeah. A
And
play date.
right, the play date. But you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you've always been remote, if you were in college during COVID, if half your classes were online, you don't know what it is you're missing by being inside of an environment. And again, there's an education that needs to happen on both sides. And, I was talking to somebody the other day. I don't know if the young people that I am working with are self-selected or they are a representative of the entire sort of thinking of the cohort, but I've not had anybody say to me, I'm just not going to do that. No, I'm out. Like they're very, very interested in succeeding and they just don't know. And so, again, I think some of this is the judgment and the blame stuff. So if a
Yeah.
Gen Z employee does something that you think is naive or wrong or stupid, if we're jumping right to this entitled generation and they're so lazy and we don't want to help them because blah blah blah. Instead, if both sides would approach each other as this is a peer of mine or this is a colleague of mine who has a different point of view. Let me kind of try to understand where that point of view is coming from. Then I think we could, so many of these things, which are interactional one-on-one frictions, we would solve. So let's take that. I don't want to come into the, or thank you. I want 3 days off, or I don't want to come into the office. If you have a conversation with somebody and you say, I'm trying to help you grow. And the best way, at least at this time in your career, is for you to be able to watch, kind of like an aquarium, right? You watch everybody
Yeah.
move around, you need that to be the best you can possibly be. So not like, oh, come on, you better be there, but I'm doing this because I believe in you. Please come, I need you to come into the office. At least all of the young people I've worked with would be like, sure, be there tomorrow, no problem. But when nobody when nobody is explaining the context on either side to each other, then it's it's just rife with problems. So on the other side, for instance, Gen Z is very good about finding information. So there is an app literally for everything. There is
Everything.
a
Yeah.
tool to build and create literally everything. And so they come back with answers to questions much more quickly than it took you and I at that point in our careers because it wasn't easy to find things. And
Yeah.
but then the Gen Xers, the leaders are saying this can't be any good because you did it in a day instead of it would have taken me a week. And instead of saying like, tell me your logic and your analysis and how you got to this, there's an immediate this can't be any good. And so what do Gen Z employees think about their bosses? They think they're rigid. They think they're dinosaurs because look, I just gave you something that's relatively good. Help me maybe with the syntax or the layout or or I'd love comments on the content, but just rejecting it out of hand makes Gen Z blame and judge
Sure.
the leadership generation too.
Sure, sure, interesting. There's something that I've used a couple times is this reverse mentoring. I wonder that probably could be super valuable for organizations to if leaders can set aside their pride and say, okay, Gen Z, help mentor me
Hmm.
be a better leader for
Hmm.
this
I mean,
next
I think we all
workforce.
do it naturally too. Like, haven't you asked one of your children at some point, like, could you please show me how to do this thing on my phone? Or so I think we do it just when we walk through the doors of work. We've got this mindset that I don't show weakness, I don't show my feelings, but it's really helpful, and there are my Gen Z clients have shown me so many wonderful things that make your life easier that I didn't have any idea about. So it really does benefit both sides.
Yeah,
And it's not just reverse mentoring, it also works as traditional mentoring. So it helps the Gen Z employee make connections.
yeah,
I mean, really, they should be helping each other with very different things, right? So the the leader mentor should be helping with
oh
how
yeah,
do I gain influence? How do I gain visibility? How do I learn the system? And the younger mentor mentoring the leader should be helping with, let me tell you about my generation because they're a huge buying component of you've got total available market. We're a big part of that market. Let me tell you how we think, and let me show you how to use all the amazing tools that are out there.
yeah,
And again, do that, you've got a competitive advantage.
yeah. Yeah. No, we could keep
I
talking,
know,
but
I know,
I want
I
to.
just looked at the time too.
I'd like to touch really quickly on your book, Play the Game, which you have written to help share advice to these early career professionals. Tell us a little bit about that, and what a Gen Z or even Gen X leader could get out of reading it.
So the book has been bought a lot of times by Gen Xers who say, wow, I wish somebody had laid it out this clearly for me when I was coming up. I would not have bounced off as many walls as I did make him, when I like bumped into him because I made a mistake. But I wrote the book for the Gen Z cohort, so it's written for them, and it basically sets out like this. If you are working inside of a system, which is a company, it runs and it ran before you got there, and it may not run perfectly and it may not run the exact way you want it to run, but the cranks all turn and it throws out a paycheck for you. So if you are going to work inside of this system, you ought to know how the system works. And there are many parts of that. A big part of that is understanding how your bosses think, and then understanding what you need to do to build the foundation so you will be respected and valued. And a lot of that has to do with figuring out what you need to do to become a trusted employee. So trust comes from making the people around you, whether that's peers or your boss's boss, know that you care about them and the company, and that your work is dependable and they can count on you. And if you can put trust in that trust bank, then you can iterate for yourself for change or for things that you might need. But you cannot walk in on the very first day when you have zero balance in that trust bank and start demanding.
Yeah.
And by the opposite, when that trust bank is full, you will be amazed how many things you can actually tweak or get help with or change or favors you can ask for.
Yeah.
And so that's what the book is about. Um, and what I hope that I'm showing Gen Z is I'm not saying suck it up and get in line and just do what you're told. I am saying you can do this in a way that is not going to um, make push you outside of your integrity or make you give up your value set or undermine your ambition. But there is a system, and you should know that.
Right or wrong,
Right,
learning how
exactly.
to navigate it is to your benefit ultimately.
Exactly. And that's exactly the point of the book.
Love it. Love it. Now, so you have your own company, People Matters. What is your website? How can people get a hold of you should they want to dive deeper into this topic with you?
So it's People Matter, not People Matters. That name was taken when I decided to start the
People
company.
Matter.
And the website is peoplematterllc.com. And if you just want to reach me, it's Ellen at peoplematterllc.com.
Love it. Love it. Well, Ellen, this has been so wonderful. You're gonna have to come back because we just scratched the surface on this topic. So thank you for that.
And I love the topic. So, just if you put one person in front of me who's interested in hearing about it, I will talk forever. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's it for this episode of the Leadership Puzzle. I hope you are walking away with some new pieces of the puzzle that will help you lead across the generation. And Ellen brought so much insight. I know I learned a ton, and I have a couple of Gen Z kids working for me. So if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, share with a colleague, and leave a review. Until next time, keep leading with curiosity and keep putting your puzzle together.